Have you ever not gotten what you felt you had coming, what you felt you deserved, maybe what you felt entitled to? Well, we're in week 2 of our series, Short Takes, and we're going to be looking at a parable that takes on this idea of kind of entitlement, and what we feel like we're entitled to. And whether you are right here in person in Chula Vista or you're at any of our church locations or watching online, I want to welcome you. So glad that you could join us this weekend. We're looking at these parables. And parables are kind of a funny thing that sometimes people have a hard time understanding. What a parable is, it's a short story that talks about something that everybody understands to explain kind of a big idea that people have a hard time understanding. And Jesus used parables all of the time in his teaching. In fact, last week we looked at a parable of this hidden treasure. And it turns out that actually we're the hidden treasure that God is seeking after. But this week, we're looking at a parable called the parable of the vineyard workers. It comes out of chapter 20 of the book of Matthew. But it really kicks off with the very last verse of chapter 19, which reads as follows. It says, "But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first." We all understand that idea, right? We all understand this notion of waiting in line, right? If you get someplace first, you're first in line. If you get there later, then you're further and further towards the back of the line, and that's just how the order is going to be. We always get to the people in the front first, we get to the people in the back last, and those are the rules of lines. We understand that today, and the people in Jesus' time would have understood that back then. And you don't mess with the rules of lines, and Jesus is starting to say, well, the last are going to be first, and the first are going to be last. And I have to think some of the people standing around were like, does Jesus know how lines work? Could somebody maybe go explain to him that's not how it operates? Because it's never like that, except, you ever go to Disney and you get the Fast Pass? I don't know if you've ever done this, if you don't know what I'm talking about. If you go to Disney, you can get this thing called a Fast Pass. And if you don't want to wait in line for a ride with all the great unwashed who are in the regular line, you can go and you get a Fast Pass, and you reserve a spot where basically it says that at 2 o'clock you can get in line for Space Mountain. You go in the express line. You don't have to wait as long as these other people, right? Here's the thing. I love Fast Pass. Actually, that's not true. I love Fast Pass when I have Fast Pass. See, I love it when it's I'm gonna just cut to the front of the line. All these people, these regular people who have to wait in a regular line. Oh, I walk past them. I'm like, behold the great one. I am the holder of the Fast Pass. I will go to the front of the line for Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters. Right now, I'm acting like a Roman emperor. I am, at that moment, the worst person on earth. And the thing is, it's great because I get to bypass the line. But here's the thing. You only get to use it a couple of times. You can't use it for every ride, and you can't use it all day. It's not an unlimited number. So you kind of run out of the times you can use Fast Pass. And then you don't get to use it anymore. And then, you know what? Then I hate Fast Pass. Because then I'm in the regular line with all the regular people, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And then, you know what? Fast Pass guy goes past me. And in that moment, I hate Fast Pass guy. I hate him. You know why? Because I'm not him anymore. And he's going to the front of the line. I'm like, this is terrible. You'll get your payback after Roger Rabbit's Wild Ride or whatever it is. It's all gonna come out in the wash, my friend. There's gonna be payback for you zooming ahead of me in the line, because we hate that. We hate that notion of people getting ahead. Because we all know the rules of the lines, and the rules are not to be broken. But then Jesus comes along and says, well, wait a second. The last are going to be first, and the first are going to be last. And it's kind of like he's saying, buckle up, because I've got something that's going to invert the way that you think about things. And when we hear that, first are going to be last, we kind of chafe at that. And you know who hates that the most? Well, the people who think they're at the front of the line, because that means that they're going to get pushed back and somebody else is going to be in the front. So Jesus starts to unpack this idea in chapter 20 of the book of Matthew. Jesus says this, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard." So it's a pretty straightforward story so far. There's this abstract idea. He says, the kingdom of heaven. And so this area where what God wants done is done. But he's saying it's like a landowner, and everybody would understand a landowner is kind of an important person. Not a lot of people owned land. That was kind of a big deal. So it's this important person. And then this important person needs to find some workers, some day laborers, to go out into the vineyards, out into the fields, and do some work. And they're going to get paid a denarius. Now, everybody listening at that time would have understood that a denarius is kind of the standard payment for a day's work. So what they're being clued into here is that the landowner, he's being fair. He's not trying to rip anybody off. He's not trying to underpay them. He's offering a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. Everybody would have understood that. Okay, the story continues. About 9 a.m, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever's right." So they went. So for whatever reason, and we don't really know what the reason is, he needs more workers. So he offers them work, and he says, "I'll pay you what's fair. I'll pay you what's right." He didn't give them a specific amount. He says, well, whatever's fair, at the end of the day, we'll settle up, and it'll be okay. And apparently that's good enough for those 9 a.m. workers. Then it continues on. He went out again about noon, and about 3 p.m, and did the same thing. About 5 p.m, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He had said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." So over the course of the day, this landowner has actually gone out 5 times to get workers. He went first thing in the morning. That might have been as early as 6 or 7 a.m. He went back out again at 9 a.m., then at noon, then at 3, and then at 5. And think about it, they're not going to work with artificial light. They're going to work until the sun goes down, and that's pretty much going to be the end of it. So the end of the day would have been maybe 6 p.m.-ish, 6:30. So the people he hired at 5 were only going to work maybe an hour. So then, here's what happens. It continues on. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 p.m. came, and each received a denarius. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us what those workers had as a response, but you got to think, everybody understood it. A denarius was what you got for a full day of work. And so these 5 p.m. workers, who only probably worked about an hour, they get up there and they get paid a denarius. That's a full day's pay. They must have been like pretty excited about that. If you ever had an hourly job like in fast food or on assembly line, I worked on an assembly line once, if you ever get paid a full day of pay for just working a couple of hours, man, that's the best day. You're getting like bonus money. So you can imagine that the people who had worked from the beginning of the day, well, they're watching this. And they're like, well, the guys who showed up right at the end of the day, they got a denarius, man. They got a full day's pay. Now, we're going to cash in because we worked so much longer. This is going to be great. We're going to get way more than we were expecting. So they saunter up to the front of the line, right, ready for their pay, and here's what happens. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you've made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, this is the landowner now speaking, "I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I'm generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Jesus ties a bow on this story by saying the same thing he said to begin the story, this inversion idea of the last are going to be first and the first are going to be last. And there are a lot of different ways to sort of look at this story, a lot of lenses to look at it through. But you can imagine if you're looking at it through the viewpoint of the people who showed up to work at 5, you're like, man, this story's great. I show up, I do a little bit of work, and I get like all the reward. This is awesome. Maybe it doesn't look quite the same if you look at it from the viewpoint of the people who showed up first thing in the morning. Think about it from where they stand. They showed up early. And the field was probably cold, and there was condensation induced. It was probably wet, so they had to work in the cold and the wet for a while. And then finally the sun got high enough to warm things up a little bit, and they dried off. But then it got hotter and hotter, and then in the heat of the day, they have to keep working and keep working. And then it finally doesn't even get comfortable until the sun starts to get down, lower in the sky a little bit. The temperature levels off, but they're exhausted from a full day's work. And finally, when it's comfortable, these 5 o'clock guys show up. And they're just walking around going like, "Hey, fellas, what's new? Is there any work to be done?" Like, we've been working in the field all day, and these new guys show up. What's the deal with this? And I would probably not be real happy as a full-day worker when those 5 p.m. workers showed up. I'd probably resent them a little bit. So then, I have to watch as they get paid the same thing as me? I think most of us would in that situation look at that and go, it's not fair. That's not fair. How is that fair? They only worked a little bit, I worked a lot, and yet they get the same amount as me. And I think we can all identify with that to some degree, just like the people who were listening in Jesus' day could identify with that. Most people would look at that and go, it's not equitable, it doesn't work out. But there's a little cue in there that Jesus put in his story that honestly, to our modern ears, we probably missed that cue. But in that day and age, every listener would have picked up on it. And here's what's happening. See, in the Old Testament, there's a book called Isaiah. And the book of Isaiah is a book of prophecy, and it describes the relationship between God and his people, God and the nation of Israel, as written by this prophet named Isaiah. And in the book of Isaiah, which was familiar to all of them, it says this, and this is only on your screen, it says, the vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah are the vines he delighted in. See, there's this cue that Jesus is giving everybody that he's talking about more than just some plot of land somewhere with vines on it. See, he's actually letting them know, this is a bigger thing that I'm talking about, a vineyard. Well, people would understand, well, that's the nation of Israel, that's the people of God. And the landowner, well, then that would be God. Oh, this is a bigger thing than just some story about a guy in some field somewhere. This is about God and his people and the workers in there. And the workers are all of us who have been invited into a relationship and decide to kind of be a part of that kingdom and to come alongside in all of the work that's happening in the kingdom. This is a big story that's happening. And the thing is that there's a danger that this story points to. See, a lot of us, when we decide to follow Jesus, after we do it for a little bit, we can start to think like, well, God's getting a pretty good deal with me. I'm a good person. I don't commit all of the scandalous sins, or at least most of them. I do good things. I don't smoke, drink, chew. I don't go with girls that do. I kind of try to stay on the straight and narrow. I'm a pretty good guy. And I think that if I'm a pretty good guy, then God should give me what I think he should give me. And the danger in that is we start to think that God owes us. That if we act a certain way, if we sort of check the check boxes on the religious checklist a certain way, well, when all's said and done, God kind of owes us a little something in return. Like there's this exchange. There's a Latin phrase for this. It's called quid pro quo. You may know this phrase. It means this for that. It's actually a term that shows up in legal terms these days. And it's this idea that if I give you this, well, then in exchange, you're going to give me that. It's this transaction idea. So what happens to us in our faith life? Well, we start to get quid pro quo with God. We start to say, God, I was a good person, and I did all the things that you said I was supposed to do, and I avoided most of the things you said I was supposed to avoid, and I prayed for a certain thing to happen, and it didn't happen. You owe me. This didn't work out the way I thought. And we start to treat God like he's some sort of cosmic vending machine. If we just press the buttons a certain way, well, then out is going to come what we think we should get. And it doesn't work that way. When we do that, it's dangerous because it starts to poison our faith. We get this performance-based idea of faith, that if we just do all the right things, then God's going to approve of us and give us what we want. We're going to earn his approval. We're going to earn what we think we should have. And so we've got to avoid walking down that road. And there's a lot of poison that comes with that, but there's three I want to talk about specifically. And the first poison of looking at life that way with that performance-based faith is judgment. Man, I fall into this so easily, and I got to think I'm not the only one. That's where we put ourselves into the seat of saying, well, this is how things should be, and this is how things should not be. And then we're the decider. And check out what the full-day workers did, because they were very judgmental. They said, when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. Circle the words, they expected. It wasn't that God offered. They expected it. They were making a judgment there. See, we all do this with our expectations. Our expectations are really just judgments of the way we think things should be. See, in this case, I think I'm a good person, and I did all the certain things the right way, and so therefore, I expect in return what I expect. The vineyard owner gives those workers exactly what he said he was going to give them. And yet that strikes them as not enough. Why? Because in their minds, they made the judgment of, we're the good workers. We're better than those late workers. See, one of the problems with this way of thinking is that we start to look at everybody around us and we start grading ourselves on the curve of who's better than who. And what we do is we draw the line between us and other people. And a lot of times what we do is we focus on the people that, honestly, we think aren't really being as good as we are. And we ignore the people that are doing a lot of really good, noble things that we don't think we're as good as. For instance, we go, well, okay, I'm probably not as good as that guy who went to medical school and is devoting his life to providing free medical care to orphans and all of the underserved people in the Amazonian rainforest. Yeah, but ignore that guy. I want to focus on the guy over here that swindled the people out of their life savings, and I bet he probably murdered some people too. I'm better than that guy. And we're so quick to do that. And so kind of, okay, where do I fit? Well, I'm probably better than these people and these people. And we draw the line of who's good enough as somewhere just a little bit worse than we are in most cases. Or sometimes what we do is we say the line of good enough, man, is way better than I could ever be, and we stop trying. See, either way, it's poisonous if we keep trying to scale ourselves relative to everybody else. It's the slippery slope. We just walk around constantly grading people and judging people. And boy, are we fun when we're like that. Who doesn't like hanging out with a judgmental person? The second poison that shows up is complaining. I'm sure none of you are guilty of this, but the workers in the story responded with complaints. Hard to believe, right? Take a look at how they responded. They began to grumble against the landowner, the very person who had offered them a job. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour. So they're already complaining. And it's funny, they didn't complain about the work or the heat of the day or anything. They only started complaining when the people that didn't work as long as they did got paid as much as they did. It's funny how that works. We start complaining when the reward shows up. That's interesting. Jesus has a little insight into human nature with that. See, what it takes for God's kingdom, his vineyard, to flourish is for a lot of workers, a lot of people to just be really selfless and not focused on themselves. And honestly, complaining doesn't exist really well with being selfless. I know for me, when I'm complaining, I'm not really focused on other people. And let me tell you, I don't want to brag, but I'm really good at complaining. Like, I'm really awesome at it. Like, if you think you're good at complaining, like, you're probably not as good at it as I am, because I've got a lot of experience with complaining. And I remember a couple of years ago, I saw this time when somebody was complaining. It really struck me, and I was like, man, I don't want to be the guy who complains a lot. I'd like to back away from that a little bit. And here's what happened. It was about 1997, and it was when my wife and I started attending this church. And I know you must have been babies then. Anyway, it was a while ago, and this is when the church was meeting over in the high school auditorium. And the church was growing so fast, and it was really exciting that there was all this growth going on, new people coming in, that we had to build an auditorium. And in fact, that auditorium, the very first permanent facility of this church, was where the West Auditorium in the Chula Vista campus is now. And it's grown so much since then. But in that moment, it was like, wow, we've grown so much. And I remember somebody came up to Pastor Mike when that happened and said, Pastor Mike, I want to ask you a question. Now that we have this new auditorium, I'm wondering when we're going to stop focusing on reaching all of these new people and start focusing on us and really just taking care of the people who are already here. When are we going to do that? And this person acted like they just asked the thought bomb question that Pastor Mike was going to go, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of that. And Pastor Mike, I'm going to give him credit. He responded as you would expect, with great loving kindness. Actually, he did. But he said, well, I'm willing to do that as soon as you're willing to go out in the parking lot with a sign that says go to hell for all of the new people and guests who are coming for the first time, because that's effectively what we'd be saying to them if we're not willing to make room for them in our little church club. And I remember in that moment going, this is the church for me. Because you know why? He didn't let this little seed of complaint fester and grow into a full-blown weed. And it made me go, man, I don't want to be a complainer. And, you know, we can easily get focused on the things that bug us. And I'll use the example of the church because I'm sure there's nothing we do around here that ever bugs any of you. So it's a ridiculous example. But let me just, give you some possible ideas that maybe, you pull in the parking lot and you're like, that guy in the orange vest, he wants me to park over here. I don't want to park over here. I want to park over here because here's closer, but he's making me park where I don't want to park. And then you get out of the car and you come in the auditorium. You're like, I want to sit where I want to sit. And then the usher's like, here, come here. I need you to sit here. And then they push you towards the middle. But I want to stay in the aisle seat so I can get out of here quick in case it gets weird. And then the music starts, and the music is so loud. Oh my gosh, the music is so loud. My brain is exploding. And then there's all these new songs. I don't know these songs. Like, I'm trying to sing the songs. I just learned the old songs, and then you got the new songs. And it's like, why do they always do this to me? And you can get caught up in all the stuff that bugs you. But what if we said, well, wait a second. Maybe it's not about me. Maybe there's a reason they do that. Maybe they're actually saving some of the good parking spots that are closer for the guests or the people who have little kids. Maybe they're saving some of those seats on the aisle for the people who are here for the first time and they don't know yet whether we're weird or not. And the new songs, like they're teaching new songs, well, maybe it's so that the person who comes in for the first time doesn't feel like, man, everybody else knows the music and I don't. I must stick out and be weird. Maybe the music's so loud so that they don't have to hear you sing. I kid. But we do get this notion that, like, well, if it's all about me, it's easy to complain, but if it's not about me, then maybe there's a bigger picture. Maybe there's something else going on. But the real insidious poison is this third one, which is this, resentment. Oh, resentment, it builds. See, when we combine judgment and complaining, it grows this weed called resentment. Check out what the workers say in verse 12. They say, you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day. Let's pause for a second on this because this is really good. These workers who were there the whole day, they say about the late coming workers, you have made them equal to us. Well, how exactly? Just because they got paid the same amount? Isn't it interesting how what we get paid defines our value for us? That's kind of a funny thing to get hung up on. And the landowner is very quick to respond. He says, but he answered one of them, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Now, I wasn't there, but I don't think the word friend was said in a warm way with a hand on the shoulder and a smile. I think it was more along the lines of a modern equivalent of saying, dude, I'm not being unfair to you. Or if we were phrasing it more for modern contemporary California, bruh. Seriously? That's the California translation of the Bible, the CTB. See, the real issue wasn't that the landowner told these workers who had been there all day that they're worth less than they think they're worth. No. That's really not what's bugging them so much. What he's saying is, these people who showed up at the end, they didn't work as much as you, they're worth a lot to me. In fact, they're worth just as much to me as you are. Now, that doesn't mean that the people who were there all day are worth less. It's just he's valuing these new people in a significant way. And it bugged the all-day workers. And honestly, it can bug all of us too. See, we all want to feel special and meaningful. But what we do is, instead of realizing that we are special and meaningful and valuable to God, we just get caught up on, well, are we special and meaningful and valuable in comparison with everybody else? And that's the wrong yardstick for us to be measuring. See, it still rests on this notion of this quid pro quo, that, man, I feel like I've been doing enough things right, and other people aren't doing the things right, and so if I do more and more and more of the right things, my value is going to go up. And if other people are doing fewer and fewer of the right things, then their value is going to go down. And in this story, it's putting that on its head. But at its root, that belief It's dangerous. Because really, what we start to think is that we can earn our way into God's good graces, that we can earn his approval, that ultimately we can be good enough for God. And I have bad news and good news. The bad news is this: you can't. You can't. Neither can I. None of us can. You can't earn it. You're just not that good. Neither am I. But here's the good news. You don't have to earn it. See, you can't earn something that's already been given to you freely as a gift. And this is one of the most misunderstood things about the Christian faith, is that we get into this checklist thing of religious ritual, and we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to do this. And if I follow all of those checklist items, then ultimately at the end of the day, God will approve of me and he'll give me what I think I should have. But that's not the way it works. He's giving you his approval through the person of Jesus Christ, who died for all of our sins, for your sins, for my sins. He lived a perfect, sinless life and gave his life for my imperfect one. That's incredible. And because of that, we don't have to get caught up in these knee-jerk reactions of judgment and complaining and resentment. We can live free of that and enjoy our walk with God, as long as we don't get trapped on that hamster wheel trying to earn approval. And here are 3 antidotes to this performance-based approach to faith. Three practices that you can do to help you get past all that. The first is this: gratitude. Now, it seems simple, but it's really tough to be judgmental when you're grateful. Take a look at the words of James 1:17. This isn't on your outline, but it'll be on the screen. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. Every good and perfect gift is from above. There's so many good gifts in each of our lives, and God provides those. And if we can stop for a moment and observe them, we can be grateful. For me, I have so many things in my life to be grateful for. I'm married, I have 2 sons. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think, man, I get to be married to Patrice. I get to be dad to Sam and Nate. And I'm so grateful for that, even when they are driving me crazy, especially my wife. Wait, is she here? But I don't want to be glib when I say that. Like, I get it. There are times it's tough to be grateful. There are times when it feels like, everybody else has everything going for them and everything's falling apart for me. It's honestly, we're in the holiday season now, and this is the time of year where, you can start to really run into that. You see everybody's holiday pictures and cards and their photos on Facebook. And everybody's standing by the fireplace with their arms around each other and they're smiling. And you go, I don't have that. They don't have that either. Do you know that picture was the 13th picture they took? And the first 12 were like scowling at each other and mad? Because the daughter had just come in and told mom and dad she dropped out of school and she's dating a carnival worker, and the son showed up with a water bong in the car, and he's got radical ideas about drug legalization in America, and they're just arguing and arguing and arguing, and it's hey, we got to take a picture. Right? They're faking it. And you're looking at this fake picture going, man, I wish I had that life. They don't even wish they had that life. They're pretending. And then we get caught up in comparison with, oh, well, I don't have that. My life isn't that good. Their life isn't that good. And when you do that, when you compare, you're just shutting off the faucet of generosity in your life, and it dries up. See, comparison is the thief of joy. If you walk around comparing yourself to everybody else, you will never be grateful, because you're scorecarding everybody. Well, where do I stack up against them? It's terrible. And the second poison that we get into is, the second antidote, not poison, the second antidote is service. See, this might seem counterintuitive, but when we talk about getting away from this performance-based approach to faith, I'm talking about service, doing stuff. Well, how does that work? Because I thought you said we didn't want to do the performance-based approach to faith. Well, here's what I'm saying, is that instead of going, well, I'm going to serve God because I expect something in return, I expect compensation, instead we go, well, I'm going to offer up what I have. I'm going to offer up my service to God and see what he does with it. See how he uses it. That'll be great. And it's incredible what God can do with that. Check out what it says later in Matthew 20. It says, whoever wants to be great must become a servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. That is what the Son of Man has done. He came to serve, not be served, and then to give away his life in exchange for the many who are held hostage. So we have so many amazing people who give of their time and their talent at this place. And they do it just as an offering of being grateful. One example that I would give you is we have awesome people who volunteer in our children's ministry. While you're here enjoying services, they are spending time with your kids. And you know why they do it? Because they love your kids. They love being around your kids. They love the energy of your kids. They love all of it. And what's really amazing is that some of our most devoted and dedicated volunteers in children's ministry, they do an interesting thing. And that's this. As much as they love interacting with the kids, they'll even take a step back and create a space so that new volunteers can step in and serve and interact with the kids and have that amazing experience. And these experienced, dedicated, devoted volunteers will actually coach the new volunteers, creating space and also making it so that their influence doesn't end at the end of their fingertips. See, their influence then now multiplies out in this exponential way beyond them through all of the people that they can coach. It's this incredible thing. See, service does this incredible inversion where the people that we're serving, we're saying something to them with our service. We say, you have value, you belong. Let me take you from the back of the line to the front of the line. And the last antidote to this performance-based way of thinking is this, it's love. And I know that some of you, as soon as I say love, like your eyes glaze. You're like, hearts and flowers. I don't want to hear about hearts and flowers. And I get that, because the problem is the word love has been hijacked to just be equated with romantic love, which is a form of love, but it's one slice of love. It's not really the whole picture of what love is and what can be. See, I think when we talk about love, we've got to reclaim the word a little bit. When I was in college, I took a history class. In the history class, we got an assignment. We had to write about interviewing a World War II veteran. And I was going home for spring break, and so this was going to be easy for me because I was going to see my grandfather. My grandfather was a veteran of the Navy in World War II. He served on the USS Massachusetts in the Pacific. And so I got to interview my grandfather about serving in World War II. And I remember I started interviewing him, and I got to tell you, my grandfather was and is my hero. He was the best. Just love the memory of him, love every conversation, that I can remember of talking with him. And so sitting down with my grandfather, I was like, Grandpa, tell me what was going through your mind when you got word that you'd been drafted. I mean, you were married, you had a brand new baby boy, and then you get word that you're drafted and you gotta go serve in some war zone somewhere? Like, what was that like for you? And he gives me this funny look. He goes, Kevin, I wasn't drafted. I volunteered. I was too old to be drafted. And blew my mind. Because my whole life I thought that, well, he went because somebody told him he had to go. But that's not why he went. See, my grandfather went for one reason, and that's this: love. You might think that's a funny way to look at love. No. He loved his country. He loved his family and wanted to protect the way of life that they would have. He loved his young son and wanted to make sure that he would grow up in a free world. He loved the people that were being oppressed all over the world by these forces. And even though he'd never met them, he was willing to get in a boat and sail to the middle of a war zone and potentially put his life in danger. Why? Because of love. See, love makes us do really surprising things. And it's kind of like a landowner doing the surprising thing of paying the late arriving workers the same amount as the people who work there all day. The surprising thing of taking the people who are at the back of the line and moving them to the front of the line. See, love is really surprising. And this little story from Matthew is really about the surprising power and generosity of love. Some of you know Bob Goff. He's an author and a speaker. He's been here a few times, and he talks about the surprising power of God's love this way. He says, we shouldn't act surprised when we don't understand what a God who says he surpasses all understanding is doing. Look at what it says in 1 John 3. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. See, love is the very reason that we can have a relationship with God. See, it's at the foundation of all of this stuff. It is what causes this great reversal. where instead of trying to earn something, we get it as a gift. Instead of being at the back of the line, we get to be at the front of the line. Instead of getting just a tiny bit of pay for a tiny bit of work, we get the full reward. And that's, again, this great reversal that God causes. And if you've been running on this hamster wheel of just trying to earn God's approval through religious ritual or just checking off the check boxes, trying to do things a certain way that's going to make God smile at you because you think otherwise he's mad at you, here's what I want you to do. Stop. Stop. You don't have to earn something that's a gift. He's already approved of you through his son, Jesus. And maybe you're a person who's saying, oh, I'm like one of those workers that it's at 5 o'clock, and man, I don't even feel like I've come in yet. I don't even know if I've been invited, and I don't know if anybody would want me in that vineyard, that kingdom, that place where you're talking about. I don't know if I fit. I don't know if there's a place for me. It's getting kind of late in the day, and maybe the sun's going to go down, and I won't ever come inside. Well, here's what I'd say to you. There's still some sunlight left in that day, and there is a place for you, and you are invited in. And just like the person who's at the last spot in the line, you're invited to the very front with Jesus where he is. I'd invite you to take out this connection card, and I want you to look at the back side. On the left side of the back, it says, my next right step. This week, I will. What's the thing that you can do this week? What's the practical step that you can take? Can you be grateful for something? Can you write down, this is one thing I'm grateful for? Can you think of a place to serve or a way that you can express love to people in a tangible way that they would understand? As you do that and consider that, let me pray for you. Jesus, I ask today that you would give us the wisdom and the insight to see how you invite us in. That there's a place for each and every one of us. And whether we've been in there a long time and maybe focusing on trying to earn your approval or standing on the outside for a long time and just feeling like we don't belong. Lord, I ask that you would reveal yourself to us in a way that we would understand and that we would be aware of your power, your grace, and your love for us. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.